Oscar better, contact tower, 118.35.
118.35, 170 or better, Sonoma Jet, 885.
Today, route 1705 with the 3000.
So a couple of people have asked me to talk a little bit about the Sangean here on Airband. So this is, I really don't know much about Airband, anything really, but this is, I believe, Toronto Pearson.
1705, turn right to Telem on course and find a flight level 230.
Right there, direct Telem, climb flight level 230, route 1705.
And one of these here, maybe it's 4, I think. No, I guess not. Is the Toronto Island Airport. So Toronto has 2 airports. One in the city and Pearson Airport, which is our main one. What I wanted to do is talk a little bit about, I mean, again, I don't know that much about Airband stuff, so I'm coming from a place of ignorance here, really. But I want to talk a little bit about what the radio does on Airband, and I really don't have any other Airband radios. I don't have much to compare it with. But it does do some interesting stuff on Airband, which it doesn't do elsewhere. Some of which it does do elsewhere, but it's not really useful anywhere else. So, as you can see, it's got a squelch control, and you can press the squelch button, turn it off, and change the squelch level, where, in other words, the point where it meets the signal. And it really works quite well. The other thing you'll notice with this setup is that I have the radio out in the middle of the room. I'm not at my desk. It's not in its usual spot. And that's because it obviously won't work with my usual shortwave antennas, right, or AM antennas, medium wave antennas. And really there's no external antenna for the Sangean for FM and Airband, so you have to use the built-in antenna for that. I also find a few other things work a little bit differently. I mean, a number of bandwidth filters you get changes a bit depending on what mode you're in. So you have 3, I think, here. I like the middle one. I like the bandwidth cut down a little bit for this. Your basic search functions do work, so you could, here, let's just turn squelch off. So you could, hold down the up button, it will now search. But of course, for two-way communications, that's not very useful for finding anything. So in practice, you're going to look them up, I suspect, most of the time. However, once you've got some presets in, and of course, as everywhere else on the Sangean, you access the presets like this by typing the numbers directly. And this is where we were. But it also does a neat scanner kind of function. So if you hold down the Airband button, it scans between your Airband presets, right? So if the Pearson tower quiets down, you'll see it scans around, and heat finally shut off. Sorry for the background noise previously.
Left turn direct Birdo on course, Air Canada 880.
Well, we'll give you a better idea of what it sounds without the background noise. But this is kind of a neat function if you were monitoring a few stations. Obviously, here in Toronto, the Pearson tower is almost always going to be active, so if it's on your list of presets, it's going to kind of dominate. But if you were looking for plane-to-plane communications, for example, and you wanted to pick some wavelengths for that, then you might want to search. So as I said, for me, the Airband is not really something that I use very often, but it's there. It seems to work just fine. It works even better if you take the radio outside. Here, there's a window that faces west, which for me in West End Toronto is towards the airport more or less, and on the flight path. So pretty good. There's not really any problem understanding pilots coming in on the approach, which goes quite a bit to the north of here, actually, out just north of the 401 usually for most runways at Pearson. But you can usually hear them just fine coming in. You'll note, actually, if you listen to it, well, now I should turn the squelch on. Well, now we can try the search. But you'll note that what I always note is that the planes are louder generally than the tower. First, they're closer, but also they're up higher.
Level 7,000 with traffic 11 o'clock and 8 miles left of A.
Anyway, I played with it occasionally, but as it's not really my interest, I get as much amusement value out of listening to the taxi drivers talk. But I see why people are interested in it. I've had lots of friends over the years who are interested in catching planes coming into the airport. Anyhow, so I hope this was useful to somebody. I can't evaluate the Airband because I don't use it that much, and it's just not something I have much point of comparison. This is the only radio I have that does Airband. I do think the little scanner feature is quite neat and seems to work pretty well. I think that might be useful to some people. And I do find the squelch, when you've got the radio away from obvious noise sources, seems to work pretty well. And the fact that it has an adjustable sensitivity, I think, is very helpful. Anyhow, hope that's been a little helpful for the people who are interested in looking at the Airband features of the Sangean ATS909x2.
No worries, 24 right will do it.
Have a good evening.
Scout